Stephen E. George was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He felt the need to follow his family's footsteps into serving for his country. George was not drafted into the Army, but he volunteered for the draft in July of 1971. Since he was a young male, he was required to serve a 2-year term. Most men entering at the age of 19, George was brave enough to volunteer at the age of 17. Stepping out the door on July 29th of 1971, George went on to serve his country without looking back. From July to the end of September 1971, he was in Fort Dix. After those few weeks, he went into training for 8 more weeks in New Jersey. Next, he went into a 10-week training for artillery surveyors at Fort Oklahoma, to then later be assigned permanently to Fort Hood, Texas in January of 1972. Training for the Army seems like a challenging thing to achieve, but as George said himself,
I was only 17 years old. Nothing was hard.
George felt his way around the Army was camaraderie, which was getting along with people that are going through the same thing as you. He felt that vigorous training was the worst part of the military. George's first assignment after basic training was advanced individual training in Fort Sowell, Oklahoma. George qualified with an M16, which was the weapon of choice in 1971, along with a grenade launcher. The theodolite was also something he qualified with, which measured the curvatures of the earth, which was also for artillery surveyors, which is what he specialized in. George became an acting buck sergeant when he was only 18. A buck sergeant is an E5 non-commissioned officer. He received a promotion only after a year of being in the military. He received this promotion because of his outstanding service. George felt that the hardest part of the military lifestyle was homesickness and missing your loved ones, but he felt that after a little time you got used to it. He also felt that the easiest part of the lifestyle was camaraderie, so getting along with others since they're all in the same boat. Lastly, the worst part of the military for him was taking orders. He didn't like this, but in the military you did what you were told and didn't ask questions or complain, you just completed the tasks. George's locations of serving and including training were 8 weeks in Fort Dix, New Jersey, 10 weeks in Fort Sowell, Oklahoma, 86 weeks in Fort Hood, Texas, and 2 weeks at Fort Indian Town Gap Military Reservation in Pennsylvania. While spending most of his time in Fort Hood, Texas as an artillery surveyor, he was in the 2nd Armored Division. This division was basically a lot of armored vehicles such as tanks and much more. They played more of a support role when it came to fighting. They were always prepared to set off into battle, but George never had the chance to since he was never called in.
Stephen E. George was in a combat support role, specifically artillery. However, he was not in physical combat. George and his unit, the 2nd Armored Division, were always prepared to fight, including the time in 1972 where they were supposed to go to Vietnam, but it fell through due to the war dying out. While George wasn't training, he spent time writing letters to family and friends, talking on the phone, and listening to cassette tapes. Stephen George had the MOS code of 82C20. An artillery surveyor was what the code represented. He also received the MOS 71B20 while stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. There, he worked as an administrative clerk as well as helping to run the battery by getting into the orderly room. George has many good memories and fun times from being enlisted, but he feels that they are too inappropriate to share with this particular audience. For good luck, he kept pictures of Anne M. George, his future wife. The best part of his service that he can remember is the camaraderie and brotherhood. He liked the challenge that living in nature and exceeding his expectations provided for him. George's service ended on July 29, 1973. Separation from service is a day that most veterans can recall, just as George can. He made his way from Fort Hood, Texas to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by plane. He felt free when he was returning home. The Army isn't a regular job. In his words,
You don't show up, they put you in jail.
It's not something that you get a choice of doing depending on how you feel one day to the next. If you don't show up for a certain amount of time, the government could deem you absent without official leave. People accused of this would be given an Article 15, which was non-judicial punishment. This could mean being imprisoned. Readjusting to civilian life wasn't too hard for Stephen George. He said that he went about life as he did before. He got a job as an industrial caterer after taking a few months off to relax after service. An industrial caterer was the formal term he used for a lunch truck driver. He took that job in November of 1973. He did that for 10 months in Philadelphia. Then he moved to Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and did it for 40 years, making a killing off of it. Now, close to retirement, Stephen E. George works as a tax accountant to keep himself busy. Being part of the service really had an effect on George. Joining the military helped him to grow up and take responsibility for himself. He claims that an experience like that at the age of 17 was good for him, considering most people didn't experience it until they were at least 19 years of age. Stephen George did not continue any of his military friendships after he was out of service, but they did help him realize something. It helped him understand that everyone is similar in some way.
We're all in the same boat.
He says, everyone has similar experiences and goals for themselves. The only thing that's different is how we achieve those goals. To this day, he is a member of the American Legion and he regularly attends the Lebanon VA hospital where his deceased wife Ann worked for over 40 years. George says that the military taught him to be a leader and he continues that to this day by being a patriot and staying true to the oath that he took at the beginning of his service. Stephen E. George wants the future generations to serve their country. He says that they do not have to be in the military to do that, but they must be a patriot and a leader in whatever they do. As a kid, Stephen E. George grew up in Philadelphia with his sister Patricia and brother Philip. As he and his brother grew older, they followed in their father's footsteps by joining the military. Philip became a medic, while Stephen became a member of the 2nd Armored Division. From there, he learned many valuable life lessons including self-responsibility, work ethic, and being a leader. He used those lessons to become successful in his post-service life where he drove a lunch truck for 40 years. All the hard work at a young age helped Stephen be able to relax in his old age while maintaining busy as a tax accountant. If there's one thing that he hopes the next generation learns from him, it's to become a patriot and a leader. Serving your country by being in the service or being a role model for those in your community is one of the most important values to his life, and he hopes that some of his thoughts rub off onto the children of our society today.